We need to present the presentation of Solden Harin. Can you make? And I think Ambassador is back. So we can, we'll invite Ambassador first. Yes, Ambassador, we welcome you. Now you can start your presentation. Yes, Ambassador Paul, I welcome you. Now we are ready. The next presenter is not available, so we'll play her video next. So I invite you to make your presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. And let me just say what a great honor and a privilege it is for me to have this opportunity to address the 5th New York City Green School Conference, and a wonderful organization it is. In 2015, the UN established the Sustainable Development Goals, recognizing the need for progress in 17 essential areas. These were from economic growth to social inclusivity to environmental protection. The international community helped to construct from this a blueprint for a brighter future for all inhabitants of our world. In the midst of a ruthless pandemic which has swept across the planet, demonstrating both our interconnectedness, but also our vulnerability as an international community, all of us must take heed and must heed the direction of the Sustainable Development Goals, because our need to make major adjustments to living arrangements, our modes of communication, all of this has highlighted many of these Sustainable Development Goals, forcing nations to reevaluate their priorities and their vision. The UN has highlighted a number of key areas of focus. Some, of course, are more directly impacting on education than others. And probably the first and most important area is action at all levels. And that implies that member states, international, national communities, non-governmental organizations, and relevant stakeholders around the world must establish a collaborative spirit to deliver sustainable development, exactly the spirit which is being engendered by this conference. Recent decades have seen a rising tide in nationalism and xenophobia, bolstered by, at times, and consequent to the COVID pandemic, a trend which threatens the bonds we share as global citizens. And we must resist the urge to build walls, and we must not fall into the false trap of demagoguery. Rather, we must recognize the opportunities for global growth, and faithful adherence to the implementation of the SDGs is a critical path in the drive for global growth. The COVID-19 pandemic has, as many people have noted, has stolen the pencils and the pens and the paintbrushes from our youth's hands, diverting nearly 90% of all students from their school communities to at-home learning or some form of hybrid education. And while access to the internet and internet devices has undoubtedly grown over the past several years, reliable connection, however, continues to evade at least 500 million students globally. And those 500 million students are at a significant disadvantage. I will echo the Secretary General of the UN's call for success in the classroom as we combat the pandemic. He reminded us last year that we must reopen schools when the local transmission of disease is contained. We must push education up the list in financing decisions to combat debilitating underfunding. And we must target the most vulnerable communities for inclusion, including young girls, the disabled population, and those who are marginalized in any way at all. And we have to reimagine education to include digital technology and innovative delivery methods. The pandemic has exposed the cracks within our global education system, problems that educators must be instrumental in addressing, and which will require a closer collaboration between private education providers and state-funded institutions. If we are to succeed with crafting the backbone of a thriving society, we must eliminate gender disparity in education, ensuring equal access to learning facilities and a pathway to all for career and personal opportunity. Strong education systems have the power to influence the development of all the Sustainable Development Goals. Target 7 of SDG 4 emphasizes the need to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and the skills needed to promote sustainable development. Educators in all our schools and colleges must inspire children and young people to seek peace, gender equality, an affinity for collaboration, and a commitment to keeping our planet healthy. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it should be the need to build strong institutions to resist future shocks, akin to the current crisis. If reliable and fast internet connections were universal, then the educational setback of the virus would certainly be less extreme. And while many youth around the world are aware of the contents and the urgency of the SDGs, reports from the UN Economic Commission for Europe indicate that throughout Central Asia and in developing regions of the world, there are many young people who have little or no awareness of these global aspirations. Thus, we, who are the drivers of educational provision, must use our resources and our knowledge to ensure that young learners are afforded the knowledge and expertise to tackle the challenges addressed in the goals. The changing climate has presented itself as the defining crisis for the 21st century. And we all know how grim the numbers are. 2019, the second hottest year on record, global temperatures expected to rise above 3.2 degrees by 2100. Without mitigation, the number of days with extreme weather conditions will increase by 100 in low-income countries by the same year. Education can help us reverse course. It can give us leadership, it can give us coping skills, and it can, above everything else, help to inspire innovation and a care and a real conscious decision to save our planet. In our schools and colleges, we should be equipping students with tools to become environmentally literate, allowing them to recognize the extent of the catastrophe facing us and giving them the opportunity to develop solutions. Looking around the world, and certainly here at the UN, when we talk about sustainable development goals and education, very often I hear India as a prime example of education for climate awareness. In 2013, the Indian government directed the National Council of Education, Research and Training to synthesize detailed and substantial content on the environment for all schools. And as a result, 300 million students in all 1.3 million schools currently receive environmental education of some form or another. You see, schools which promote civic education, and that includes environmental education, lead to more educated voting populations. Studies have repeatedly shown that more classes in government and civic education beget less apathetic voting populations more willing to use peace to promote change. A 2011 study of 106 countries and 238 ethnic groups demonstrated that groups with higher levels of education were less likely to engage in violence than groups with lower education. What's more, an analysis of 120 countries has shown that conflict is less likely when educational inequality is reduced. We've established that education is important and that it manifests itself throughout the Sustainable Development Goals. But what specific actions can community leaders take? There are several ways to apply a multilateral and data-driven approach to our global education system and further the SDGs and knowledge of the SDGs. Everyone attending this conference should work towards engaging your local communities outside perhaps of your individual schools or colleges in interdisciplinary project-based learning to provide opportunities for peer-to-peer learning, to reach out and to connect with youth in all areas and in all classes and in all segments of society, but also to reach to the older community, to reach to the community of parents, adults, grandparents, those who guide, those who mentor, and those who influence our youth. Through implementing actionable education within a strong curriculum framework, with generous financing policies, educators and other learning institutional stakeholders can help forge a future where sustainable development is a cornerstone of education. And I would here call upon those great global financial donors, those countries, rich countries, those corporations, those companies, those organizations that control large amounts of aid, and to challenge them to put more of that aid into helping schools, educators, and the people understand and believe in and practice and strive for the Sustainable Development Goals. In the past several years, new obstacles have arisen that complicate the worldview. Artificial intelligence, yes, climate change, and one that is all too obvious at the moment, global public health. All of these problems show us that education is a lifelong process and that striving to achieve sustainable development is an integral dimension of all aspects of education. Only when sustainable development is integrated into our mindset, only when it is the focus of our attention in all aspects of our life, will we appreciate the profound global change that these goals promise. As the Secretary General of the United Nations noted at the opening of the 76th session of the General Assembly on Tuesday of this week, the world must wake up. We are at the edge of an abyss and we are moving in the wrong direction. Climate change was one of his top priorities. And my friends, the imperatives of the moment demand that education and the Sustainable Development Goals go hand in hand and present present and future generations with a wake-up to the challenges ahead. The Sustainable Development Goals are our guiding light to a green future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. It was very inspiring words, and I'm sure that the way you are concerned about the parents, grandparents, and the way you have addressed and inspired us. We, as a Green School, is only the engine of the green economy and green future. So green universities are the ocean of opportunities, and these universities will be creating the number of opportunities and providing the green graduate to the planet and to the green entrepreneurs, those who will be serving the world and saving the planet from the impact of climate change. As you said about the grandparents, we here in India, we collect the green story from our grandparent. We inspire students to take the green stories from their grandparents. They're associated about their culture, their values, their day-to-day life, and how the situation and time has changed and time have evolved accordingly. So this is the way we are trying to document the knowledge of the old generation and to taking it to the new generation and then documenting it. And these green stories are so inspiring, and the knowledge is not available in the Google. And we are happy that our grandparents are sharing their best knowledge with their grandchildren, and these grandchildren are getting the grades and some marks and some credit from schools to improve their learning outcome. So this is the way we are trying to do. Thank you very much for your inspiring address, and I'm sure that your country and your interest toward the